the Microsoft Fabric tools that your team didn't know it needed to actually start using yet, but would actually really help kickstart where you're going. So a little bit about me. I work at Purple Frog Data Analytics, and I've been here now for 3 years. And throughout that entire time, I've been working with Microsoft Fabric. So I started at Purple Frog at the same time Microsoft Fabric became kind of in private preview. So it was my job to kind of understand the systems that we have or had at the time and how that would translate to Microsoft Fabric. And many of you will probably know that Fabric had a lot of hurdles to begin with, so a lot of my time was spent trying to figure out kind of like the bits where I can fix it, so the kind of little patches that we could put in place. And I've got to say it's come a long way to where we were 3 years ago. So on top of that, I'm an enterprise advisor and a STEM ambassador, so my Purple Frog help me to kind of get out there and do some extra activities with local children's schools, and sometimes even adults who want to kind of learn a bit more about tech. And so with that, I really enjoy going out and actually kind of promoting women in tech, because obviously it's a gap in the industry, and I'm a big advocate for going out there and getting more girls from an early age interested in a career in data or tech. And part of that is I'm driven to do that because I've got an 8-year-old daughter at home, and I had her young. And so it was a kind of driver for me to say, well, if I can do it and show her I can do it, why can't I show other kids to do it and be that role model that they need? And then tying into today's session as well, every year for my partner, for my daughter, I don't do my own, I buy my own, but I'm the resident birthday cake baker in the house. So with that, I decided that how could I explain Microsoft Fabric in a way that was relevant to me, could be relevant to anyone with any technical knowledge, from possibly a child all the way up to an actual person working in the tech like me, a data engineer. So what we're covering today, so first I'm going to set the scene and what the actual cake analogy is in terms of data engineering and Microsoft Fabric, and then break that down into the different levels and how that ties into what the Fabric toolbox is. We'll have a couple of little demos just to kind of show you what the pages look like and where you can find this information. And then at the end, I'll have a link to everything as well, so you don't have to kind of try and figure out what you're connecting to as we go. So to begin with, obviously, to bake a cake, there are multiple steps involved. You need to be able to get the ingredients. You've got to actually put the ingredients together and then bake it. But to do all that, you need a kitchen. You need a kitchen to be able to do your baking in. And so for me, I view Microsoft Fabric as it is as a platform, as the kitchen. It's where you bring all those things together. You have your ingredients, you do the actual baking, and you've got your cake at the end. So obviously Microsoft Fabric is a single software as a service platform, and it covers the full data lifecycle. So you bring your data in, which we will see as the ingredients. You start to transform them, you store them in there. It's everything. And so it's kind of like that state-of-the-art kitchen where you've kind of got everything you need all in one place. You don't have to keep running around going to different places to get it. Everything's available for you there. So One Lake in Fabric, this is where all your data will sit. You can connect all your different data warehouses, data lake houses, data marts, all using that. So whether they're in the same workspace, different workspaces, that data you can actually cross query it, and it's opened up a lot more for data analysts and data engineers with that kind of flexibility on where you can get your data from and where it will go to. Microsoft Fabric is broken down into multiple workloads. So we've got the data engineering, which is kind of your pipelines and where you store it. The same with Data Factory. There's kind of like a quite similar data warehouse as well. That's specific to warehouses, but obviously you've got the lake houses on there as well. And then you've also got real-time intelligence. So that's your streaming data and bringing in data at a real time, and then Power BI for your reporting. And so the way Fabric works is everything sits in individual workspaces. Everyone has different ways of doing this. I quite like having a workspace for dev, test, prod. Some people will break it down into business domains, and so this is kind of your equivalent of, say you've got the cooking area, you've got the prep area, you've got your pantry where your ingredients are stored. That's kind of how that ties into the kitchen kind of analogy. And then obviously with Microsoft Fabric, rather than paying for the individual use of a pipeline or storage, you're paying for a capacity itself. So these are your FSQs. And so that's kind of like paying, rather than paying for an individual hob and upgrading it, you're kind of renting a kitchen that you can use and get going, and you don't have to kind of like try and figure out all the little bits you need and spend time upgrading it. So Fabric is a great tool if you're, whether you're a small business or a really big business, everything is kind of in one place and available for you to use. And majority of it doesn't cost you added extras. I think the only thing that I can really think of is if you hit quite big storage amounts, you pay minimal for that storage. So the next step when you're baking a cake is obviously the ingredients. That's what makes the cake. Obviously, raw ingredients don't mean anything to you. If you look at eggs, flour, milk, that isn't a cake itself, and don't think it'll be very nice to kind of sit and eat an egg on its own. But in the analogy, we would look at these as our various data sources. So we might have our ERP systems feeding in, we might have HR, finance systems. You might even have stuff like coming from workflows where you've got machine vision connected in, where you can see what's actually going on in your machines. You can bring that data back in a real time. But with each of these, you can't actually it's quite hard to see what your end goal is when you've got all the data separate. So then that would be our bronze layer if you're looking at a medallion architecture. However, at Purple Frog, we use the ETL a bit more. So this is our extract layer where we're actually using pipelines to bring the data from the source into Fabric. And then we start to combine those ingredients and transform them into something that resembles a little bit more than melded together, which is our transform. And this is where we kind of clean up the data, make it look a bit more reliable and accurate. So for example, we would take out duplicates, or if we know that we're working in currencies, we make sure that everything is to 2 decimal places. And then from there, we'll move on to our load, which is kind of moving the data into that final data warehouse step. And this is where the data is actually looking like a sponge cake. It's not got any icing, it's not got all the decoration on top, but this is data that you could report on, you could actively start querying. And yeah, like a cake, you could actually eat it at this point. It might not be as fun to eat, but it's ready for people to use. And so with that, the recipe is actually how we get there. So in Fabric, there are kind of 2 main ways of bringing data in to your data warehouse. The main one is data pipelines. A lot of people are using these as these are low code. They have a user-friendly interface that you can use. It's kind of a click and it will sort everything out for you. These are great for orchestrating the data movement and bringing in your data from one source to another storage layer and then again. These can be scheduled to run at specific times. You can choose which order they run in. You can have parent activities, child activities that will kind of trigger other pipelines to run. And in that, there's also quite good error handling. So you can kind of jump into Fabric if something goes wrong, and it will give you detailed kind of error messages on what went wrong, how, and then from there you can kind of figure out what to fix. The other way of ingesting data would be Spark notebooks. So a lot more people are starting to move to these, typically using PySpark at the moment, but I've been seeing a lot more use of the Spark SQL and just T-SQL notebooks as well. And so these are great for when you've got more complex transformations or a lot bigger of a data set to kind of transform and move. Because the Spark engine that's built into Fabric is what the notebooks use, so it's a bit faster at processing. And they've added UDFs, so you can actually define functions and store them in Fabric at the workspace level, and then you can use those kind of like custom kind of code snippets rather than having to reprogram them each time for a notebook. So now we're going to jump into what the Fabric Toolbox is and kind of jump into the website as well and explore some of the pages. So quickly, if you can, I just want to see if anyone has started using Fabric Toolbox or at least knows what it is. If you want to give me a thumbs up in the chat. Oh, that's nice to see, at least some people. So the Fabric Toolbox it's fairly new, and it's basically just a large GitHub repository. It's community run, so it's overseen by the Fabric Cat team, so the customer advisory team. But it's also open to just kind of anyone working on or with Fabric to contribute to. It's open source through obviously GitHub, and it's regularly updated and managed. So sometimes they might realize that something new's come in that actually fixes an issue that one of the toolbox snippets was working on, so they'll adapt that as well. And so for me, this is kind of the difference. Was I was previously whenever I baked a cake, I was using standard whisk by hand, not really enjoying it. A lot of the time asking my partner to kind of do that for me. I'm not a fan of manual labor, and that is to me. But we ended up getting electric whisk. He bought me one as a Christmas present. I think it was partly a present for himself as well, to not have to keep whisking my batter. But yeah, the Fabric Toolbox is kind of like that. It's helped me speed up my fabric development, much like I can now bake a cake a lot quicker. So the first one that I'd like to talk about is the fabric assessment tool. So this is kind of before you've even started looking at Microsoft Fabric. Maybe you've got a previous setup that exists. This one is for Synapse only, but it's an absolutely great tool that lets you it's an automatic tool that you can plug your Synapse solution in, and it will help assess what you've got, what can be migrated, and it will even help you kind of plan out that migration. So if we take a look, so if we go into, this is what the Fabric Toolbox looks like quickly as well. So I'll show you over this one. So it's on the Microsoft page, but you can get it through the toolbox. I've got a link at the end. So this one is in, if I remember correctly. I'll do the link again, that'll be easier. So yeah, this one is in the tools box, and so the way that the repository works is it's not just the code snippets. The people who have created these tools have actually spent their time to create like a user guide, a full facts and questions on some of them, and it's a very detailed plan to know if it's something that you can actually use for your solutions. But this one is great if you do have a Synapse existing solution. And yeah, you just kind of plug it in, and it will give you a overview of what your solution is. So for example, this one, it will tell you what resources you've got that can actually be migrated to Fabric. It will help you prioritize them by the severity and complexity, so you can kind of work out a plan on exactly how you want to migrate. And then yeah, so this is the complexity by activities as well. So it will rank them. I don't know how they sort out the ranking, it's internal for them, but this will show you kind of, it helps you kind of make that plan. And then following on from that, there is I've lost it now. Apologies. I'll bring up my slides again and go to this one. So on top of that, they also have the migration assistant. So this is for Data Factory as well. Obviously, you can't use the previous tool for your Azure Data Factory, but if you've got the Synapse solution, this will help. So this is one of the methods that you can use for migrating from Synapse to Fabric. And this is pretty much an auto tool that will do that for you. It's really good if you don't have complex pipelines. So if a lot of yours aren't high complexity like that previous one showed, then this is a really great tool because it will literally take the JSON files that you've got and take it as an ARM template and then just install that into Fabric and get you set up. And then what it will do is flag anything as you're working through and let you know if there are any issues, discrepancies, so that you can handle that before you start to run everything again. This is just a really good way if you don't have that complex solution to move everything over and get started, and then you can build on it from there. So the next one is, these are kind of things that you might have while everything's working. So during your ETL phases, Fabric has the ability to schedule. It's kind of bare bones at the moment. So the scheduling at the moment is daily, weekly, monthly, but it will be the same time every day that you set, or the same time every month. If, say, you want something different to happen at the month end or month start, it doesn't have a built-in solution for that. I had a customer who wanted different processing on the first day of the month because of a batch load that happens. And so what I had to do was put in a solution into my pipelines, which is the same way that they've done this in the toolbox. And yeah, it's things like that where you might want that slightly varied one-off occasion or something to happen slightly differently at a certain time. That's not native in Fabric, so there's a tool for that in there. You can download the package and just add it to your pipelines, and it will give you all the information you need to fill in. Similarly, there's no native file kind of like trigger. So if something appears in your files and you want to process that straight away, Fabric can't do that natively. However, someone at the team has been able to put together, again, a pipeline activity that you can just download and drop into your pipelines in Fabric, and it has the bits that you need to fill in just to point it to the correct location. And yeah, you can get rolling with that immediately. Another great tool is the lineage extractor. So this helps you kind of map your Fabric estate where you've got pipelines running into different places. It's all done through a Python notebook, and it's just a really quick overview of what you've currently got in your system. So you can kind of map where everything's going, who's using what. I use it for if I'm about to delete something or change something, say, I can actually quickly take a quick look and say, well, actually something else depends on that. I'll need to check what that is before I go ahead and make these changes, so that things don't break further down the line. But yeah, this one on the repository, they give you the notebook to install. You can just download and import that into your Fabric workspace. And again, run it from there. All you've got to do is change variables, but in the notebook, they're highlighted as what you need to change. And don't have the link for that one. I'll bring all the links up at the end. So this is one for finance people. there's an incredibly great tool, and it's really good for the analysis of the costs that Fabric is incurring. So someone has built this on the back end of Fabric, and you can install it into your Fabric workspace, and it will fully break down what each cost of each workspace, each kind of area is using, so you can see how you're best using your capacity. This can be plugged into, so you can get it to report to you. So if there's an alert, say you want to know if something hits above a certain amount of spend, you can have that then ping your finance department with a Teams or an Outlook and let them know, so that you can come and immediately use the report and kind of drill down into what that spend is. And it's all built in as a Power BI report, so it feeds on your OneLake backend, and anyone can access it as long as you've got the right permissions for them. It also has a built-in data agent, so if you want to ask it questions in natural language, like you would with ChatGPT or Claude, that is also built in. So you can say to it, like, what was the spend on this day? And it will come back to you with a response as long as it can. Obviously, you will need to go back and consolidate that it matches, but it's a great first step of being able to actually break down those costs, and yeah, will make finance teams very happy. This one is an install package as well, so you can literally just, again, install it into your Fabric and get running with it. And then there's another section in the toolbox, which is a lot of little code snippets. A lot of them are SQL queries that are just kind of help you with kind of little niggles and bits that kind of happen on Fabric. So we've got the workspace size notebook one that will help you calculate every notebook that you've got in your workspace. It will calculate the size. It calculates the size of the workspaces and the lake houses in each workspace. So it's a notebook that you can click and drag into Fabric again, and just kind of helps you sum up how big each of your workspaces are. Maybe you can look at separating them out, or where you've got lake houses that are running slow, you might be able to pinpoint why that's happening. The active requests, this is great to see who is running queries and what queries are being run against your SQL endpoint. So this is warehouses, lake houses, the SQL DBs as well, you can run this on. And so if you are suddenly experiencing slow SQL queries, you can jump on there and see what else is being run and see if there's anything slowing that down. And then along with that, if you do see someone or something running a query and it's taking up a lot of the capacity, a lot of time, there is a script in there that can help you shut down that query for the time. And then obviously you can either contact that person if it was an individual running that, or it's a good way to cancel a query if you can't do it through the interface. And then also there's the time point one, which will allow you to kind of look at a specific time and date and say what queries were being run at this time. I use this one to kind of see if the right query is being run. If I've made a recent change, I can check which query has run as part of my ETL process. So obviously we've got our cakes, so the sponges, and we've brought everything into the data warehouse. But the next step is actually building our semantic models. So these are the relationship diagrams for the tables. So this will sit on, if you're using Medallion, this sits on the gold layer. And sorry, I've lost my train of thought. Yeah, so this sits on the gold layer, and this is where you'll actually look at how your data connects with other tables. You can add additional measures using DAX and build your reports from a semantic model. So this is really important to actually get this section right, because if your data model is built poorly, your reporting will not make sense. You'll have missing numbers. You might have relationships that aren't actually correct. So you're connecting data that doesn't make sense. And so one thing we recommend when you're actually looking to build your semantic model and the tables within it is look at columns that you're not actually needing. You can remove them and kind of trim down the size of a semantic model. While you're doing it, look at if there's any relationships, if there's any IDs that exist but aren't actually mapped to each other, because obviously then you'll miss data being connected when you actually begin to report. Look at any patterns in data. So if you're suddenly noticing that everything's kind of, if you've built a measure and everything's kind of looking a bit too perfect, right, you might have added accidental roundings or built in, and then maybe get someone else to check your model before you actually publish it so that they can do a sanity check on it as well, because obviously you might have built it, spent ages building it, but someone else might be able to come in quickly and spot these problems. So yeah, this is quite traumatizing, this picture, but it's a great example. So the reports and the dashboards that you make at the end of the day are what your stakeholders are seeing. So they don't get to see all of the data engineering behind the scenes. They don't even see the data model half the time. They get that end report. And so it's absolutely crucial that when you make these reports, it looks good as well as the data being correct, because people don't trust. Yeah, you need a report that will build that confidence. If I was to look at a report that kind of looked half done, numbers were a bit iffy, I wouldn't trust that to report on. However, if you've got good data with good relationships, it looks accurate and it looks nice, people are going to find that more appealing and have that trust in the data. And so these pictures are the examples of that. Both of these are a strawberry cake. However, I can't tell you how that first one tastes, but I can tell you I wouldn't want to even risk trying, whereas I'd be more inclined to try the second cake because it looks nice, and then I might find out more about whether or not I trust that person, because yeah. So yeah, so the Power BI reports for me, as I would describe it, is the icing and the decoration on the cake. So we've built on top of that semantic model, which was putting the cakes together. However, we want to decorate it. We want it to look nice. We want it to match color branding. And Purple Frog, on our website, we have a collection of Power BI reports that you can kind of look through and see kind of examples of where we've done this. But also on top of that, it's the quality checks and alerting for data. So in notebooks, we might add tries and accepts and range checks, nulls checks to make sure that the data coming through our notebooks is accurate and we're actually picking up data in the first place. Using the pipeline built-in alerting, so whether you use Teams or emails to send those out, or just actively going to the workspace monitoring to kind of check where your notebooks are and pipelines are running. Using that finance cost analysis Power BI report for ongoing cost and capacity monitoring is important, because obviously if you're suddenly seeing spikes in capacity usage or you're incurring higher costs, you'll want to figure out why, so you can stop that sooner. And then using the Spark monitoring tools that are built into Fabric as well for real time, so that you can, if you're bringing in real time data, you can amend those issues immediately before you have to backtrack quite far back to kind of fix that stream again. So this has been quite quick. I will jump back onto the fabric toolbox in a second, just to kind of show you a bit more of kind of how you find everything. But I just wanted to cover what we've looked at in the toolkit. So we've looked at the fabric assessment tool and assistant if you're using Synapse, the different kind of pipeline snippets that you can include, the lineage extractor, which is really good for your kind of looking at what the dependencies are in your workspaces, the fabric cost analysis, which will help you with your financial cost analysis, and then those little query snippets. So if I jump back over to the toolbox, and I'll show you in a bit more detail where we can kind of find these things. So in monitoring, this is where we've got our cost analysis in here. And again, this comes with a full README. It's got details of how it's actually working, what the different pages will mean and what you can extract from that. And then further down, it has how you can install that and get started using it. In accelerators, they've got a bunch of different ones. I haven't played with many of these ones yet, but this is stuff like how to mirror a lake house, and again, all the details are on it. If you want to start playing with other ones, then it's just a brilliant place to kind of jump in, explore. You never know what you might find that's actually going to solve an issue you've got. Samples contains a bunch of different notebooks. So this has, for example, oh, this one, not a great example. But yeah, you'll at least find a description of what it is. And then from here, you just install that and plug it into your fabric. You can import that. Scripts is where you find the small SQL queries. So for example, if we jump into that kill queries one, it will tell you exactly what it is, how to run it, add in all your parameters, or you can just extract the SQL that you want and run it yourself. You don't have to put it into a Fabric activity. And then tools was the main one that contains our assessment tool, the lineage extractor, there's an audit tool here, and then the Fabric migration assistant as well as in here. This is the most detailed one. It goes into quite a lot. But yeah, it will show you exactly how to do your migrations. It's step by step, so you can follow along with it. Further down, it will tell you kind of, I think it had a section where it would show you, is it not? Let's do it again. Here we go. So it'll show you which connectors will and won't actively move along with it. So some of them you'll have to reset up the connectors yourself when you get into Fabric, but some of them will actually move with it when you use the migration tool. And so this has a full list of all of those that will move over. And then it breaks down how it's actually doing that for you, and what to do if you can't migrate certain things. It kind of gives you an overview of what you can do. Again, lineage extractor, this one has all of the details and how to, they're all just kind of really good friendly user guides on how to use these tools as well. So you're not just kind of blindly going into using the Fabric toolbox. And then if I come back up to the main page, so yeah, as I said, it's all run by community or the Microsoft Customer Advisory team. It does use a variety of languages, but it is, again, open source, as I mentioned. So if you've come up with anything that you found as like a fix for a problem you've had with Fabric, other people may or may not have had that issue, but it's always worth submitting to here and contribute. So you can do that here, and then it will kind of get reviewed by the Microsoft team and decided whether or not it needs to be published. But another thing that I would recommend if you do use this is giving it a star, because then it shows Microsoft that people are actively using the Fabric toolbox, and so they will continue the development on it, which obviously is helpful for many people. With that, I wanted to ask if there are any questions that people have or thoughts about Fabric Toolbox. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you might have. And if you don't have anything else to say, then I'd be happy to hear what your favourite cake flavour is as well. As a cake lover. To this screen so people can scan. So this is a link tree, so you'll be able to find the Purple Frog blog where I've kind of given an overview of these in written format. You can add me on LinkedIn, and it's also got the links to the Fabric Toolbox and also the Fabric documentation from Microsoft. So if you scan that QR code, it should take you to a list of links, and I'm sure we can get that put in the chat as well. Thing to round it up quickly. So just wanted to point out that our next webinar is on the 16th of July, again, same time at 12 o'clock. And this is to discover how organizations are moving beyond AI experimentation to building secure, scalable AI solutions. And that's with Lewis Prince, our MVP data engineer or AI engineer. So yeah, thank you, everyone.